Hi guys, welcome to my tutorial on airbrushing a matte varnish from Vallejo products. So I did a video not too long ago on applying a gloss coat, and a lot of people have asked me about applying a matte coat. The reason being that they are tending to find that they get a very chalky finish or a very frosted finish. So I'm going to give this a stab today to see what I can come up with. What I've done in the past is, if I have used wanting to get a slightly less glossy finish on my models, what I tend to actually do is actually still use the gloss coat and maybe just add 20% of the matte coat just to remove some of that sheen. And I find that to bring a gloss coat down to a satin coat, you only need 20% of the matte because the matte really does contain a lot of additive that takes off that sheen. So if you add too much matte, you end up with quite a frosty coat if you spray it on too thick. So I'm going to give this a go. As usual, I'll be using the Liquitex Airbrush medium to thin the paint down, maybe 20%, and then the slow dry fluid retarder, just adding 10%, just to help with the prevention of tip dry, and also just letting the paint obviously dry a little bit slowly. Okay, so I'm just going to put in 5 drops. And we're going to experiment just doing this, neat. I'm still going to thin that out ever so slightly. Just that. I'm going to put a couple of drops of thinner. Actually, just in case, 1, 2. 1 drop might be okay, 2 drops won't hurt. And then 1 drop of retarder. And then obviously I want to backflash that in the cup, just so that it mixes up nicely. So what I'm going to do today is do a very light coat, which is how I recommend you do this. But I also will show what happens if you do end up spraying a thick coat, or spraying it wet, to see what that actually looks like. So first going to just adjust my spray, making sure that I'm not going to blast it. So you will find that these gloss coats are quite thick in consistency, so you will need to open that up a little bit more. I'm just going to get my cotton swab ready for tip dry. And you will find that the gloss coats and the matte coats will clog your tip quite quickly. Okay. Wow. So yeah, very thick stuff. I guess I could thin this a little bit more. Okay, but here goes. Just one very thin coat. And that's probably all I'll do. There. Just like that. I'm just going to dry it a little now. Okay, so if I now do it again, but this time do a thick coat, which is what maybe some people are doing because they're trying to get a protective layer. So I'm going to do it over here and spray it wet like I do with my gloss coat. And we'll see what happens. So that's looking quite wet. So this is how I would do a gloss coat. So let's see when that dries. We will see what these two look like. So this guy here on the left, very, very thin coat. It's pretty much dry already. You can see it's removed some of the sheen, just a bit of a dull. This guy on the right, quite thick, wet sprayed like with the gloss coat. And we will see what these two look like in a little while. So while I had all of this prepared, I thought, well, I might as well do a satin coat as well. So this time I've got, 80% gloss coat and 20% dull coat or matte coat, and I'll spray that wet, like I would spray my normal gloss coat. See how that looks. Okay, so that's wet. Let's see how that turns out. A few hours have passed and both parts have dried. Looking at the two of them, to be honest, the one on the left was the one that I did a very light coat, and the one on the right I actually sprayed a wet coat. It wasn't particularly thick, but to be honest, I don't actually see that much of a difference. I mean, this guy on the right is maybe a little bit more dull, but it certainly isn't frosty, which a lot of guys are getting. I have actually seen frostiness in the past. I don't know if maybe you just need to shake that bottle a lot more, or maybe I did in the past, like maybe some of you are doing it, just spraying too thick a coat and just putting too much of that matting compound on, which is giving it that chalky or frosty effect. One thing I have noticed, by spraying wet, maybe you can't see that, a little speck of dust has landed and kind of got stuck in the paint there, whereas by doing a very thin coat on the left, there's no dust, there's nothing to stick to because it dries so quickly as you're brushing. If I turn it around, this side here is what I did to do a satin coat, so you can see it's not glossy, but if I compare them side by side, you can see there's definitely a sheen to it. So what I did to the one on the right there is I had 20% matting compound and 80% gloss. So that's given me quite a nice satin finish. And this one I sprayed very wet and let it self-level, and that actually looks quite good. So that's something you can do rather than buying a satin finish, because some guys have also said, well, if they spray a thick coat of satin, you also get a frosty effect. So I was just demonstrating here that you can still use gloss and just remove that glossiness with a bit of matting compound, and you remove the risk of getting a frosty finish. Alright, so that's it for today. Thank you very much for watching. If you have any questions, please leave a message below and I will get back to you as soon as I can.